Welcome to the Resilient Campus Podcast, amplifying the voices of college inclusion innovators. I'm your host, Sabby Labor, founder and CEO of Resilient Campus. Join me each week as I interview professionals on the front lines of campus and community movement building. For more information, please visit resilientcampus.com/podcast. Welcome back to the second installment of episode 31, a 3-part discussion series recorded at the Transforming Higher Education Collaborative, which took place in Tucson, Arizona in July 2019. I joked that the first part of the installments was my better late than never attempt to get this very important dialogue out to the world. And so thanks for your patience with me while I, make time and energy and capacity in my life to do so. And I appreciate your patience and flexibility with the release of podcast episodes in recent months. And I'm so happy to be back and to be a part of the conversation with you and to be in community with you. So thank you for tuning in and for joining our community. In this first installment of the episode, and no worries if you hadn't had a chance to listen to it yet, you will be able to pick up where we leave off in this second installment. But just to give a quick recap of what took place in the first episode, we discussed the following question: what does it mean for us to convene across and within institutional hierarchies and geographies? So we had a really, really fantastic conversation. It took us on so many different paths of epiphanies and connections, and I'm looking forward to you being able to listen to that or being able to pick up from that conversation if you've had a chance to tune into that first part of episode 31. In this part of the episode, we center the following question that guides our discussion: what does it mean for you and us to build something that has never been built before? You'll hear familiar voices of some past podcast guests, such as D.L. Stewart, T.J. Jurian, and Z. Nicolazzo, and you'll be able to meet some new brilliant humans as well that I just felt so grateful and continue to feel grateful to be in community with. They're such humble and brilliant and just, I think, game-changing individuals in terms of what they represent, how they live into the authentic nature of themselves each day, and just really appreciative to have been a part of this convening. So for more details about our guests, if you want to read through their bios, check out their headshots, put a face to the human voice that you're hearing on this conversation, feel free to visit the episode's webpage at resilientcampus.com/31.2. resilientcampus.com/31.2. As for now, I'll get out of your way and let you enjoy the episode. What does it mean for you as an individual, us as a collective, to build something that has never been built before?
So this is Alex. So as we've been talking about Brown's book, and I'm going to look directly at the quote on the wall, so this is not from memory or impressive, but it is in the book. Brown says it is our right and responsibility to create a new world, on page 19. And I think about how, for me personally and for us as a collective, I appreciate both the right and responsibility piece, because it's proclaiming that we're trying to stake out space for this, but there is a responsibility, as Z would say, to the up and coming legendary scholars and children, to create possibility that's expansive, right? I think what we're trying to do here is create a possibility, not the possibility, even though the acronym is sometimes the. But to think about being what I think Laverne Cox refers to as possibility models for not only ourselves, but for future generations and iterations of collectives like this.
I think this is sad. I think it's almost like inherent in us coming together, but like the thing we would do is envision something that hasn't been done before. I think your point, Sammy and TJ, right? Like being trans is that thing that we come together and actually it might have been Z too. It was like being trans, we are expected to be ahead of gender conversations or bringing along gender trend like conversations and transitions. And I think in some ways there's this piece around when we get together, I would say this particular group, when we get together, we start dreaming about what could be different or what's not working and how might we fix it, or just, and not ever as like solutions, but as possibilities. And I think that in some way, it's the beautiful thing about transness is that we don't have to subscribe to any binary if we don't want to. Some of us do, some of us don't. And we can talk about the problems of that, but inherently we get to be here and move something that never gets done. And that happens, I would say, always in these, like, oftentimes in these spaces, is that we're here together and inevitably that possibility and dreaming comes up naturally, because I think there's this potential. And I'm sure in your book, S, when we talk about trans consciousness, there's this potential around gender that I think as trans people, we get to have that other people don't have, to think, okay, so what if we're moving not from one to the other, but across many expansive both and always and never at the same time, and how that, like there's this thing that I feel compelled to do when I'm in this space is to dream of a potential that hasn't been written and to build a city that I would like to live in, and what it could be, and have others and invite others and co-construct that city in a way that I don't think I get to do with the hierarchy of X, Y, or Z coming through.
Yeah, this is S. I think for me, in addition to the dreaming, I feel like we're living it, right? So I think often at home, I'm like reading, people theorizing about what could be. I've been theorizing and thinking about a world that I want to see, that, right? But being here, it's like we're actually like living that. So to DL's point around the bathroom today, yesterday when we were swimming, like I've been on many vacations in the last year to places where I was swimming, and I would think about, okay, I'm taking my shirt off, like folks are going to see my scars. I've had people ask me like, what's up with your chest, right? Like I knew that wouldn't be a thing here. I stayed in the pool till I got wrinkled. I usually, like, I'll dip in for a little while, then I'll get out because I'm like, folks are looking or whatever. And I just feel like, yeah, we're dreaming and we're living it. And it feels like because we're living it, we can create it. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like I can grab it. Like I'm like, yes, this is what it is. This is what it feels like. This is what it tastes like. That breakfast was delicious this morning. This is what it sounds like, right? In a way that just reading about it, I'm like, but like, what is that?
It's embodied.
Yeah.
This is TJ, and like I feel like that's so important to be able to do, so that we actually have something to work towards instead of constantly against, because that's what we're doing on our campuses, right? We're constantly working against something, but we're not necessarily always working towards something, and this gives us something real to work towards. And we use words like dream and envisioning, and sometimes that can feel like touchy-feely and out there, but like you said, it's not. Like this can be real. It's been real for us for however many hours, days we're together. And I think the real challenge then becomes, how do we take it out of this space, right? How do we not revert back to superimposed hierarchies, for example, like once we are not together physically? And how do we sort of like take this bubble with us, so that when we are in conversation beyond this space, we just don't let other things seep in and get in the way of us continuing to move towards the things that we are trying to build.
This is DL. I think to your point, TJ, and building off of what S was saying about what I called embodiment, is the necessity. A lot of the dream and visioning often sounds very headspace, right? That's something you do with your brain, or with with something that seems up here, right? Or that we can perhaps connect dreaming and visioning to heart, right, and feeling something. But I think we also have to dream with our bodies, right? And so how do we feel that in our limbs, in how we move in a space, and how, in what ways do we, small is all, the smallness of moving in our bodies in a way, in dream, right? Sleepwalking, right? How do we sleepwalk the dream out as we go back into our respective bases, right? Local bases, and that creates and pushes what I had written down before we started talking, or Stevie, as you posed that question, was how we, by doing this, building something that's never been built, we are compelling others to confront the reality that we've been lied to, that this is it, compelling others and ourselves to reject the exceptionalism of the existing structures, that, they're flawed, but, this is really the best. This is it. This is the best thing. I mean, it needs to be reformed. It needs to be tweaked. We can do this better. We can do this better. And we're like, nah, we just could not do this, period. Maybe this is not the thing to do, right? But also sort of, and I think this is what's really interesting, and there's, I'm not going to try to find it now in the book, but there's a place where Brown talks about messiness and how creating new possibilities is messy, right? And which made me think about, you're so messy. That was so messy, right? And we use that as a jab, right? I mean, I even just said this to someone a couple days ago, calling them on the carpet on something they'd done. It was like, that was really messy, right? But creating new possibilities is messy. That was really messy, right? And it can be that messiness, and reclaim that word, as it were, as a signifier that we are moving in the right direction. That was really messy. It wasn't perfect. It didn't come out, and maybe didn't have the effect you meant for it to have. It didn't work out the way you hoped it would. That was really messy. But that is the potential. There's the potential in the messiness. And you sleepwalk, you know where you kind of know maybe where you're going, but some of you trip over stuff, you knock stuff over, because you're not awake, right? How can we walk the dream and refuse in some ways to be woken up, which, flips the whole woke thing on its head and whatnot, but yeah.
Z, and you're kind of giving voice to some of the things that I'm thinking, but couldn't really find the words for. Now, and I'm also thinking about like lucid dreaming and how do we hold on to dreamscapes as a possibility. Yes. But also thinking about the fact that this for me feels like freedom, and freedom is really confusing. To come to this space, and a very confusing space to come to, like Arizona, the desert, and to come to this space and to cultivate this sort of freedom, I think is really confusing, and to do it as a group of folks that are continually choosing to engage in education and a schooling process, which teaches us not to imagine. I was a really imaginative child until I started going to school, and then I was schooled out of that. And so I think some of this is just about trying to deal with the confusing and the messy realities of what it means to reclaim something that I've been schooled away from and continue to be schooled away from imagining, which is freedom, collective liberation. So yeah, like how do we hold on to and harness these dreamscapes?
I've been sitting with something that you said, Sabby, about having your armor and being able to take your armor down. And like in my head every morning, I've been getting up for the last couple of days, I'm like, just like stay soft has been the thing that I've been saying to myself every morning. I think partially because, right, talk about being in the midst of a big transition. I left my job a week ago, drove here, and then was immediately surrounded by these wonderful humans. So I'm literally trying to make sense of my world right now, and the only thing that is keeping me sane and grounded in a way is being able to be as soft as I naturally am, because I'm a big old softie. And if I act like I'm not, it's because I'm actually terrified, or I'm looking at you, or I figured out what the thing is, right, in like that's gonna make you tick or like pique your interest, and that's usually like sharp, it's hard, it's witty, it's charming, like whatever. There's this like like my conference self or like my work self, and because I'm in a place of reforming that for myself, it's messy, crying all over the place. Like I haven't made any jokes about, oh well, my biceps look strong, it's because I'm full of feelings, and I know I used to say that a couple of times, and I'm like trying to actively not do that, but that's also because in this space I feel like I can be messy. I feel like if I need to have a feeling, I can have a feeling, and I think that is a potential and possibility that's not a dream for me. And so for me, I'm actively thinking about what does it mean to not sleepwalk, but actually like be present and here and moving and walking. And so like, how do I keep that softness outside of this space here? Because I don't want to have to walk around with armor anymore. That, let's be real, doesn't work, right? Like it doesn't feel good to wear that armor, and we just kind of figure out, like, I think I've been in a practice of where the spaces where I could take it off and put it back on, and like, what does it mean to actively look for spaces where I don't have to, like, how do I get in the process? And Adrienne Mary Brown talks about, what does it mean to not be so hard all the time? Like, feel your feelings, be soft. What is it? Less on point, more present, right, is something that I've been sitting with, is how do I not have to be so on point all the time? We joke about that thing, oh, that was on point. I'm like, no, I'm just here. And have actively tried to lean into what does it mean to be here, and what contributions can I make when I be here and am here, and not trying to worry about being on point. and making the citation or the, tweet-worthy statement, but just being able to be here. And I think that thing of like, what does it mean to be and exist in a space that hasn't been done before, is like, I can make that part of my like requirements to be here.
Something about a quote that's on the wall. Again, I'm not fancy at all either, about how we slip out of togetherness the way we slip out of the womb, and it's messy and we're surprised to be alone. And somehow this feels like messy and birth, but like positive, as opposed to aloneness. And so I think it's like a reimagined, like, this is how you slip into togetherness. It's a different birth. It's the way she was talking about in the book, being a doula and accompanying folks through a birth process rather than like the highly medicalized whatever version. This feels like that, like we are each other's trans doulas. It's still messy, but it feels like birth instead of aloneness, and like creation instead of scary.
Trans midwifery.
I find it really telling that in this conversation, and as we're starting to kind of piece through this question, no one has said what it means to build something is that we're going to get to this result, which is ultimately, like, that is something that I think that's one of the reasons why I really resisted Brown's book at the very beginning, because the first place that I go is like, so what is the thing? And not just the thing, but like, what's the thing that I can point to, or that we can point to, or, Melvin the other day used the word deliverable, which is like such a taught and trained word, and is such a thing that I'm constantly asked for. What's your deliverable? What's the end goal? What's the result? What's the implication? And I think it's really kind of a nice shift for me to really focus on the fractal components, the small is all kind of thing, and not to think about what's the ending of this, what's the thing that I can point to and tell other people we did this over this weekend. Yeah, it's kind of nice.
This is DL one last time on this.
There you go.
Because, like, let's be honest, this is not going to be the last time I talk. I try not to talk as much. I really do. When I would tell people what this was about, that I was coming here to do, I would say somewhat flippantly, but also kind of seriously, well, we're coming together to plan, to take over the world. And
I may have
right.
said something.
It may not be right, but I don't think it's wrong. And so, I said yesterday, but it's the, planning to take over the world, right? That we change ourselves as we plan. And that is as much a part of the world takeover as trying to make anything happen in a specific way out in the world. And so I'm looking at a quote that was written up on one of our sheets from page 10 in the book. Scaling up would mean going deeper, being more vulnerable and more empathetic, right? And it's really about she talks about it's more self-work, right? It's more of the small scale communal work becomes even more important as we think about the broader picture.
As you were talking, I started thinking about the quote from Earthsteed, which she references in the book, is all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. And I think about how that's been something that we have been moving in and out of in conversation in various ways. Right? Like, it's not a big change, but also how are you changed by the thing that you are leaning into and creating? And I think that's the beautiful thing about us coming together and being able to do that, is that we keep touching it to figure out it being like this space, this time, this a messy space, and we leave changed, and then we come back and do it again in some ways, and through various mediums, whether it's digitally, whether it's in person, whether it's like through scholarship that we keep co-writing and authoring together. It's this like thing that we are constantly changing, and also how like the beautiful thing is that we get to do that, and then whenever we go back to wherever it is that we are, we can keep changing those things, and like, what does it mean to do that and also stay together at the same time?
Sabby, one of the things that I appreciated about Melvin's question about deliverables was it was a really important reminder for me that I made conscious decisions that I was able to make because Z found funding for travel, that I don't have to prove to my institution that I'm going to bring something back to campus. And I feel great about that, because I'm like, I'm here for me, and if there's something that I can take back to the institution directly in my role right now, awesome. If not, I'm okay with that. And to not have to work within these systems that are informed by capitalism about how we prove that it was worth the institution's money spent and what are you going to deliver as a result of it. And I feel so liberated from that whole process and the procedure side of it that I can just like be here and, you know, and at the same time have the privilege of like, I've accrued vacation, so I'm going to use that time. And I know that that's not, you know, when we're thinking about hierarchies and moving within and across them, that that's something that I have the privilege of having access to in my title, you know, having a doctorate. These kind of things, they've all helped me arrive to this place, and it's an important reminder of how we are socialized in these different roles and functions. And I think that building something that exists outside of that is so scary often for me, and it's messy. And I think the scary part is that the scarcity mindset is always there. Like that internalized scarcity and that internalized messaging around there's not enough resources for everyone to be well and to be thriving is like just kind of like at a low whisper, always in the back of my mind. And so just really trying to like be like, be quiet, low voice. That is not right. And just like working against that messaging, but then also not being for myself naive to the fact that it wasn't that long ago that I was a, you know, graduate student in my doctorate program being told like, yeah, you'll be in this meeting, but I just need you to be quiet and take notes and like know your place. And that's what you're going to contribute. And that's your worth and that's your value, and just earn your paycheck and don't be too loud. And just being told like you fit in this tiny little box, and that's what we're funding you barely any money to do. And so like knowing that these hierarchies and these systems exist and that they are still, they're at a low whisper or a very loud shout for many of us at different times and in different ways. And so just being aware of that as I myself think about dismantling and building new these ideas of how we contribute and how we equalize role. And we very much have been socialized and continue to have to exist also in these blueprints of higher ed hierarchy and procedure. And don't be too loud, be just loud enough so that we can sort of tokenize you and get your contributions, and then we burn you out, and then we'll see, you know, you'll be at another institution in 3 years, and that's just the way it works, right? So like, how do we both change within but not become that institutional embodiment of like rigid hierarchy, rankist like ideologies, valuing people by what they contribute and what they deliver, right? And just like, how do we imagine outside of that? And for me, that's something that I appreciate being in this group, imagining. I feel like we've done a lot of ideating together, which for me feels really like soul fulfilling and soul feeding. So I'm like, wow, I really am noticing that I'm missing that. Like, how do we build context where we can just like imagine together and envision together things that haven't existed before? Thanks so much for tuning in. Head on over to iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss out on a single episode.